I wanted to actually warmly welcome everyone today to our exciting series of building community resilience trainings. We're excited that we have this program for not only today, but actually each month. We will have another program February 3rd. Which we're going to talk about today. And Karen's going to put in the chat our flyer so that you can see all the other trainings that we're going to have this spring through the month of May. So each month we hope you will join us and be with us and actually help us to think about building community resilience. We have been working on a very interesting project with Cornell, an innovation grant with Orange County Cornell Cooperative Extension. And we'll also be adding Monroe County Cooperative Extension along with Delaware County Cooperative Extension in this grant program, where we're learning together to build community resilience, not only in cooperative extension in our state, but also in our community. So we welcome everyone's participation as we're learning together. We think actually working on this grant and offering the training together is really going to help us grow. Last year, we did a wonderful series on growing resilience, and we want to welcome everyone back that attended those programs. And now we're actually starting a new series that we think will help us continue to grow resilience. So it's really something that we find is so important during this pandemic environment that we're in. I want to say that, we've been, working as a team, and I want to thank our team, Ulika and Karen, especially for helping to put this program together and promoting it for us. And I also want to recognize Cornell Cooperative Extension in Delaware and Orange County for actually teaming up to do this work together. We are funding this program through the Delaware County Rural Healthcare Alliance and our ACEs task force in Delaware County. And, we're really reaching out to all of our partners in this work together. We think it's extremely important for families and communities to focus on this. And we want to welcome again everyone today and thank you for being with us. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions, so we want you to put them in the chat. Ulika and Karen and I will be monitoring the chat for your questions, and we hope that there's some time at the very end of our presentation today so that you can engage in some of your questions and thoughts and comments through the chat. We also want to make sure that we hear from you. We have an evaluation. Karen is going to put that in the chat so that you can fill that out. There are credits available for teachers that participate and fill out the evaluation. So we encourage you to get your credits if you're in the education field and would like to receive them. Our next training will be February 3rd, again at 3:30. We will be focusing on building community resilience for youth with Dr. Ken Ginsberg. We're excited about that program. We think that all educators, people working with youth, will want to make sure that you're with us for the next presentation. So we will now welcome our presenter today. And thankfully, we have had a few minutes to talk to him. Rick is currently the Director of Training and Curriculum Development for Community Resilience, an initiative, and he really has really put together the First Nations Community Resilience Network. Rick Griffin holds a master's degree in education and uses his education to develop innovative content and to deliver engaging presentation. He speaks to thousands of groups from all over the country and is widely recognized for his work with trauma-informed practices. So I'm sure he'll be touching on that today. As a former executive director of trauma-informed therapeutic residential programs for a struggling teens. Rick has firsthand experience with developing and implementing strategies and structures for fostering resilience. His experience allows him to consult with many schools, businesses, and community organizations in our country. And what is really exciting about his work is that he's on the leading edge of a lot of new programs. He is currently working on his latest project, Purpose Driven Play, a series of games designed to equip individuals with the skills to overcome adversities. So, you know, just all of the things that he brings to us. Again, I'm Jeannie Darling from Cooperative Extension, Delaware County. I want to welcome you, Rick. And I'm going to turn the program over to you, and we're looking forward to your presentation today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you. And good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much. It's so heartwarming, the opportunity to speak with you. And I just had to start off with a joke that I heard about a Cornell Cooperative Extension employee. Magic Wizard had come up to him realizing, wow, this has been a really tough year for you folks in the New York area. I would love to grant you a wish. What would you like? And the employee thought about it for a second. He said, you know, I absolutely would love to go to Hawaii, but I don't like to fly and I don't like boats. Could you build me a highway between New York and Hawaii? That would be just fabulous. And the wizard looked at him and said, are you crazy? Do you understand how much that would take for me to be able to do that? Do you imagine the concrete it would take? I'd have to put up pillars in the middle of the ocean, and the environmental impact of all that's just ridiculous. And Cooperative Extension employee thought about it and said, yeah, you're right. Okay, how about, could you help me understand really resilience, community resilience building through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? The wizard looked and said, were you thinking a 1-lane highway or a 2-lane highway? So that tells you how challenging it can be in a sense. But I do want to tell you, it's really not magic. It's science. So we don't need a wizard to understand this. We really just need science. So my question would be, if science, and I get it, it's probably not everybody's favorite subject, but if science could help you to develop a greater appreciation for the differences of people, would you consider the science? How about if science could help you provide fair treatment for all individuals based on their circumstances? Would you be down for that? If science could help you to eliminate barriers to full engagement for everybody, would that have any interest of you? And if science could help you to experience a 1-hour training and completely transform your life for the better, how about that? Would that be beneficial for you? Okay, well, that last one, that's probably a little bit more magic than science, but we all need a little bit of magical inspiration, right? So let's see if I can inspire you through some science as well. And I'm going to start off with really a quote from Maya Angelou. As we look at she is about to be on the quarter, and that is so exciting for us. But the wonderful line in her poem, and the poem goes on and it starts to say, we seek success in Finland. We born and die in Maine. In major ways, minor ways we differ, but in major, we're the same. So I note this obvious difference between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. And I think that's what the science is really about, is that we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about the science that tells us how alike we are. So let's go deep into the neurological structure. And I want to start off by talking a little bit about what our brain does and how our brain does it. If we can see how much alike we are, then I think we have a better understanding of ourselves. We'll have a better understanding of what resilience is and the impact we have on each other. And I think it can be powerful through that lens. So give me a few minutes while I want to just describe for you the process that the brain is going through in the service of keeping us safe. And I think this really underpins what community resilience is all about. So it starts with the idea of a threat prediction. Okay? The brain's desire is to keep us safe, and it does so by trying to predict everything that we do in order to avoid tragedy, in a sense. So it starts out with a sensory input. Okay? If you think about sensory input and what that looks like, sensory input really is that the scientists say that 11 million sensations are happening around us all the time. And our brain is actively trying to take in those sensations and then decide, well, based on all these things that I'm taking in, what situation am I in and what should I do about it? And so out of all those sensations, now even though we may experience 11 million of them every second, the brain can only really make sense of a handful, at least in terms of our awareness. But it runs this powerful algorithm. Okay, it's like a statistical prediction that the brain is making, saying, based on all this stuff I'm experiencing right now, how do I keep this organism that I'm in charge of operating? How do I keep it safe? And so I think that's an astonishing factor. Too many of us just think that the brain is involved in thinking, but no, it's predicting everything we do, taking in that sensory input, running through a statistical prediction, and saying, I wonder what I should do about the situation that I find myself in. And so when it predicts a threat, when it runs that prediction and it says, oh, I think this is a threat, we have what we call an unbalanced interoception. Our inner perceptions starts to respond and says, this is no longer balanced. This is a threat. So that balance is in the middle. Science calls it homeostasis. But when we're out of balance, when the brain is predicting a threat and says, you're in a situation that you might want to prepare for in a different way, it starts sending these chemicals through our body. And we know these chemicals, these stress response chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, and we know what is released in that sense, but it's flowing through our body. And it says it's not bad in the short run. As a matter of fact, I love a YouTube out there by Nadine Burke-Harris, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She talks about this and says it's great in the short run, but like when you're walking through the forest and a bear jumps out and these chemicals are released and it moves you to action. But she says, but what about when the bear comes home with you? What about when there's a constant threat prediction? When you're thinking about threat all the time and cortisol and adrenaline is constantly flowing? We know that it leads us to a response. We've got this amazing fight, flight, or freeze response that the psychologist talked to us about, but it is doing some greater harm when it's ever present. When the brain is constantly predicting a threat, it really becomes an energy drain. Yes, we know if the bear were to jump out instantaneously, the chemicals would cause us to move ourselves into action. We would fight if we had to. We would run if we had to. We would freeze, whatever the brain thought was most beneficial. But it takes a lot of energy for the brain to move the body into action of that sort. Because the brain is really active. It's looking around, seeing all of its sensory perception and saying, in this situation, like if you were on maybe the ocean's on one side and lots of trees in the forest on the other side, maybe a cliff on one side and you can't really run. The brain's going to see all that instantaneously and make a prediction, say, well, you can't run, so you need to fight. You've heard those stories about people who like end up punching a shark. I always just found that fascinating, that somebody was out on the ocean, out on a surfboard paddling away, and a shark comes out and they fall in the water, the shark attacks them, and they think to punch it. Because the brain certainly says, well, you can't run out in the middle of the ocean. You need to do something different. And so it says to fight. But that's an energy drain. It's taking so much energy. We know that it's a big energy drain because if you think about that, even digesting food takes energy. But when you're in the middle of the fight, when your brain is predicting all this stress, all these systems are really joining in to say, gosh, you don't have enough energy to fight this fight right now. So borrow some energy for some other systems. So like the digestive system says, well, I don't need my energy right now in the middle of a fight. I don't need this energy. Borrow some of this. Reproductive system. So you don't need to reproduce in the middle of a fight. Let me borrow some of that energy. Our circadian rhythms. You don't need to know when to go to sleep and wake up in the middle of a fight. Let me borrow some of that energy. So the body's constantly lending and shifting energy to help the brain keep the body safe. And that energy is a great drain when it's happening over long periods of time. Well, obviously, we start to see all the onset adult diseases that are a direct correlation to the amount of stress. It's simply because the body has been stealing energy from these systems for such a long period of time. Could you imagine what it's like for your digestive system to run empty and it doesn't have the energy to run it over time? Of course, you're going to have maybe it's irritable bowel syndrome. Could be all kinds of things that are really a direct correlation to the body trying to keep it safe, trying to run this threat prediction system in order to keep it safe. And the interesting part about it is we start making some other predictions based on the other sensory input. And the predictions really sometimes are accurate and sometimes it's an error. Sometimes we find ourselves predicting that we're in a threat situation when maybe the environment really is safe. But because we've already associated with other threats, it's easy to keep that threat prediction. And this whole phenomenon, our brain predicting threat, this is what we call trauma. And we can see that trauma happens when people start predicting a threat, when the brain is doing what it does naturally in the service of keeping us safe. It has effects on our body long term. But we're not here to talk about the trauma side of it. I really want to, I set the stage for you to understand really the other phenomenon that's going on in our brain. The science talks about the safety prediction. Yes, we've got 100 billion plus neurons, and they are designed to really predict threat, to help us to avoid that threat, but they also can predict safety. And it's the same process that occurs in the beginning. We've got the sensory input, all these sensations are happening around it, but instead, the statistical prediction of that sensory input, instead of it predicting it's a threat, it may predict that it's safe. And says, yes, I know this is all happening, but I'm thinking that we've had this before and it was a really safe experience. It reminds me of when my babies were younger, and I would go to peek in on them in their room, and they'd bounce out of the crib immediately as soon as they would hear the door kind of creak, and they'd bounce up and they smile and laugh because they were predicting safety. They're predicting that, hey, this is when that sound happens. I usually see a face, and then the whole body pops up, and it's one of my caregivers, and he comes over and he holds me and he loves me and he squeezes me, and he starts to predict that safety. That statistical prediction of safety creates a whole different response in the body. Instead of releasing, things like adrenaline and cortisol, now it's the body stays in balance, but it needs to be rewarded for being in balance. So it sends chemicals like oxytocin, vasopressin, serotonin, dopamine. You hear about those feel-good chemicals. The body's releasing that when we have these safety predictions. And instead of fight, flight, or freeze, what it does now, it helps us to connect. It helps us to be engaged. It helps us to feel great about the people we're around. As a matter of fact, oxytocin is in its highest levels in the body with a mother who's just delivered her second child and beyond. It's nature's cool way of making sure that mothers are engaged deeply with the child. Doesn't have to worry about, can I possibly love my second child like I loved my first one? Because the body starts releasing chemicals and says, of course you can. We're going to give you a little bit of help. And we know that this doesn't exist in all the animal kingdom, because we know that unfortunately, there's animals that even devour their young. They don't have the levels of oxytocin pumping through their body. So it's the brain's wonderful way of keeping us engaged and rewarding us for being engaged that has a direct outcome to the people around us, to our environment. And the cool thing about it, it's not depleting the energy, it replenishes energy. And scientists sometimes call it the rest and digest system. We literally can replenish the energy that we have in our body once we feel that connection. And all those associated sounds and sensory inputs and sights and touches and sensations that we feel, they are also associated with safety. Just like my little baby in that crib, that sound of that doorknob turning was associated with the door opening up and a little bit of light coming through that. And it was associated with a head popping through, and then a whole body, which is associated with arms wrapping around me, which is associated with this adult going, making all kinds of silly noises. So it starts to continue to predict safety. And so this phenomenon, this prediction of safety, is a phenomenon we call resilience. It's our ability, our brain and our body's ability to mitigate the threat predictions with safety predictions, because we know threat predictions happen. But as a matter of fact, it's probably the brain's default, and it makes sense. In our ancestors, we know that life was a little different. They didn't have houses and cars and things, and when they were out in the jungles and in the forest, they had to worry about animals really choosing to do them harm. And so their brains were wired to think about, wow, is that thing in the distance? Is that something that I can eat, or something that can eat me? And sometimes, is that something I can mate with? And so it's trying to make predictions, but the easiest way to keep you alive The easiest way to thrive so you can pass on your genes to another generation to keep you surviving was to say, well, let's assume that it can eat you so you don't get too close at first. So we have a default of the threat prediction. And psychologists, they call this and talk about this in terms of bias, in terms of a negative leaning bias that the brain has. But we don't often talk about the fact that the brain can also predict safety. Yes, we understand that there's a default that may say, let's think about threat first, but we've got this capacity, these mechanisms that also can do some wonderful things to the body. And resilience is what we can refer to this as. So you can imagine if it's helpful for you to feel this in your own body. Can you imagine what it's like if you were to have the sensory input of hundreds of people caring for you, trying to keep you safe, connecting with you? That's what the power of community resilience is. As a matter of fact, there is no doubt in the literature that a relationship is the greatest protective factor of all time. They say when you have just one caring adult, it can help mitigate lots of adversity. So if one is helpful, think about the impact of 2, of 20, of 200, 2,000 and more. That's community resilience. And we need it because there is trauma everywhere. There's threat predictions everywhere. It's constant. And there's lots of domains in which this trauma can occur. We talk about it in terms of adverse. Most of us have heard the term adverse childhood experiences. Yes, that's the trauma that occurred inside your household prior to the age of 18 and really well known. That study was absolutely paramount in helping us to get a grip on what is trauma. We at Community Resilience Initiative, we've ushered in some other thinking, and see that it's not just about things that happen to you in your household prior to the age of 18. There's lots of factors that create that threat response. And we labeled some of them just to kind of spark your creativity. By no means is this an exhaustive list, but we thought that the term ACE, that's pretty clever. And we know there were some folks up at George Washington University that came up with adverse community environments and kept that acronym of ACE. And so we said, yeah, there are threats in lots of other environments, not just your community as well. So we looked at how about adverse cultural exposures, when you're exposed to people who are different from you. And yes, and that's what this is all about. We've got lots of folks who work that are different from us, and it causes a threat response. And that's important. And yeah, there are others, and we talk about adverse circuitry expression in terms of how people are wired and how they think and how they respond and process information. Adverse catastrophic events. This pandemic has put us in a situation where we understand there's trauma everywhere we look when we can't predict what's going on with our health and with the well-being of others. There's trauma everywhere. And again, I can talk about all kinds of adversities, and we can keep with the same acronym, but think about the threat that you would be predicting if you were driving your car on a lonely highway in the middle of the night in a rainstorm and you blow a tire. Okay, or better yet, we can use the acronym if you blow an engine and you have adverse car engines. That's an ACE. Every relationship has had somebody that's gone a little sideways. How about adverse crazy exes? We have all kinds of adversities. It just goes to show we've got threats that happen all over. But it's not about the threat. It's not about the threat. It's about the safety response. It's about our brain's ability to predict safety so it mitigates that threat. And that's what we call resilience. It's the good news of resilience, and resilience is some good news. It's great when we start thinking about the impact of relationships. Again, the #1 protective factor of all time. But when it's happening in a collective, when you're having that safe prediction in a collective, the power of that, and focusing on how do we feel that safety prediction in a group? What do we do to make sure that is something that is positive, something that we're thriving within, that we're being supported by every single day? Resilience is the good news. It's those safety predictions that come from those around us. And now resilience, it goes by a lot of different names, but today I want to talk about I am because we are. That's what it comes down to me. Because I am because we are is a relational strategy that really promotes an understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, all of the things that may cause a threat. A relational strategy can be helpful because we know that a strategy like community resilience, like I am because we are, can buffer the effects, can mitigate the effects of trauma. So I love the thought of that. I am because we are. It's not just me. I'm not seeking resilience just for myself because I'm getting it from a collective. And I love the power of that. And Disney refers to it as something different. I'm watching the Jungle Book with my kids, and they call it the law of the jungle. The strength of the wolf is the pack. Same thing, same concept. It's about that safety predictions that we get from others in our environment. Yes, sociologists may call it community resilience, but in Africa, it's a spiritual philosophy known as Ubuntu. I am because we are. And if you were in the science of epigenetics, you really refer to it as the science of hope in a sense, because it says that literally my cells come from somebody else and they are changed by other people. So there's lots of ways to think of it. But I want you to understand that really it's all about community resilience. It's about the science of when we have our safety predictions that are brought on by those in our environment. So regardless of what you call it, it's clear that it matters. What you think to others, about others, what you say to them, what you do, it matters. It matters. And so when we think about this, I want you to understand that you are the individual that can matter in your community. That's what the science comes down to. It really comes down to what you think about people, what you say to people, what you do to people. It matters. They are wired, in a sense, to have you matter in their lives. Think about babies. The human species, we were absolutely born under construction. There's hardly anything we can do when we're born. We're different than other species. If you have a snake that is born as a baby, they can slither off on day one. And horses, although they're a little wobbly in the first few seconds, it's not long before they can just gallop out there. Lots of other species immediately after birth can function fairly well, but the human baby, no, we're born under construction. We can't even put on a jacket when we're cold. We can't feed ourselves. It's even hard for us to take a nap all by ourselves. We need somebody to put us in a safe place to even do that. And that's one of the exchanges in how our brain develops. Now there's a positive side of that because we are wired by our surroundings. And that brain wiring, it's not even complete until we're in our 20s. That's a long period of time where the brain is just learning. And they say we go through this process called tuning and pruning, that those 100 billion neurons, you're actually born with more of them as a baby than you need as an adult. And so it kind of focuses on the things around it and the things that are important, it tunes into and creates connections. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So they wire together when it comes across something that's important that it sees lots of times. And things that aren't important, says, well, this is kind of an anomaly, it's not important. Literally, those cells will die and fade away. They get pruned away. That's the whole process of developing. That a baby into its 20s, it's trying to figure out in life by its environment what's important, what's not. Language, it comes wired to understand language, but it gets wired into it if we're exposed to, if you're exposed to 2 languages frequently as a baby, you will have no problem understanding those 2 languages. But after that point in time, after a point in time when that tuning and pruning process has kind of gone into its more weaning stage, it's much harder to try to learn something that you were exposed to. So just the idea that we need all this assistance as a baby because we are being wired by our surrounding tells us the importance that you have in developing everyone you come in contact with. Everything we think, everything we say, everything we do wires the people that we're around. As a caregiver, you know this. You're careful about what you do and we wire each other. And it's not just our baby, it's everyone we come in contact with. Everything that they're exposed to is helping to wire them. And the impact that this has on adults, it's amazing because we now know that we're wired by those around us. The diversity of people around us, the color of skins, the different things, the different sounds, the shapes, the size, wires us. We become completed by those in our realm of experience, those that we're exposed to. We are wired by how we are treated. Fair or unfair, we're wired by that. The world becomes safe based on if we feel that we have an equitable environment. It becomes fairly dangerous if we feel like our environment is inequitable. Equity matters. How we treat one another matters because it's wiring us. As an adult, you come into the workforce with some understandings based on how you were wired, on how people treated you, and what we do together, how we engage with one another, or how we choose not to engage with one another. Inclusion, this matters. This has wired us. Those that got involved with us, those that engaged with us, it wired us. The obstacles that we've overcome, that wires us. It helps us to say if we had to overcome certain obstacles, that can help benefit us to know that, hey, we can do this. We can overcome challenges. All those experiences wire us. And that's a phenomenon I really just want you to think about. Now we call it different things. And sometimes we pathologize folks who are raised in an environment where if you're a baby and the only individuals you see, the only caregivers you see have the same tone of skin that you have, and you feel nurtured and connected and supported, and they're wiring safety and love and encouragement and support. And so you're learning to associate that person with all these wonderful feelings and what that person looks like with all these wonderful feelings. And then if years later go on before you're exposed to somebody else, that first exposure is going to register as a threat because that's what our brain does. I mean, we call it all kinds of horrible things like racism. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but sometimes it's an outcome, it's a consequence of how we were wired because we were only exposed to certain things. It's not to villainize someone, it's to say they weren't exposed to enough diversity in order to understand. We get exposed to terms at really young ages, and this is one of my pet peeves, is a term called stranger danger. What do you think it's like to be wired in a culture who uses that term over and over again? You're wired into a culture that says things that are strange are dangerous. How do you think that impacts the community in which you live within? If all the individuals in that community have been wired to think that things that are strange are dangerous, what does that do for somebody who comes into the community that may look a little different, believe a little different, think a little different, talk a little different? The immediate threat in their brain says, oh, this could be a danger. And it responds to try to keep us safe. It responds with fight or flight to try to keep us, it's just a natural mechanism that we've been wired. That's the impact it has in adults. So that's the underpinnings of community resilience, because we already know we're having an impact on people. We know what we do, what we say, what we think is having an impact on people. It absolutely is. But I know that that's probably real theoretical for some of you. Some of you want to say, well, can you make this more practical? Well, yes, I can. Let's get practical. Okay. So there's three things I want to talk to you about, and don't worry about the slideshow. I don't really have an impressive slideshow for you. There's just three things. You can write these down. You can write them on a piece of paper. You can write them in your heart. But my guess is you probably already think about them. Maybe just not in these terms, but here are the three terms. I want you to think collectively, speak life, and show up. That's just my practical way of saying, if you want to build community resilience in the most practical way, we know about theoretical. We know that we need to, as a group, as a collective, we need to help people predict safety. We get that. But what does that look like every day? It looks like these three things: think collectively, speak live, and show up. That's it. That's all we have to do. Well, let's break it down a little bit. Think collectively. Okay? Here's what it means to think collectively. Sorry, went a little far there. Think collectively is we are better when we think collectively. In our Western culture, we're really known more for our individualism than for our collective thinking. And how's that working for us? In the midst of this exponentially expanding virus, how did our thinking impact other people? It's like some folks would advocate to say, when we started thinking collectively, our infection numbers went down. When we started thinking individually, the infection numbers go up. There's a benefit for thinking collectively. So I think when we have the ability to think collectively, it's powerful. Do you think collectively? No, I got a lesson on how to think collectively, really from my youngest son. Okay? My youngest son, Torin, he's 11 years old now. Now, I think he's a math genius, but he's entering fifth grade, or now halfway into his fifth grade year. And but a couple years ago, he was so advanced, and we were trying to help him with fractions. And yeah, he wasn't really dealing with fractions as a third grader, but he wanted to. He saw his brother do this. He wanted to learn fractions, so I wanted to teach him a little lesson on fractions. So I said, so Torin, I know you like Crumble cookies. It's a place hereby sells these big giant cookies. So if I were to buy one of those Crumble cookies, a chocolate chip cookie that you love so much, and I were to offer you either a half or a quarter, which one would you like? And without thinking about it, he said a quarter. I said, well, but hold on, Torin, a half is bigger. And he said, well, I know that, but if I take a quarter, it leaves more for other people. I'm thinking he understands thinking collectively. Wow, that's powerful. Our body thinks collectively without jealousy. What I mean by without jealousy, I get jealous when I start to think about, I like thinking about myself. I'll admit it. I'm trying to get better. I've been raised in a culture of individualist thinking, and I want to try to think collectively. But my body does so without the jealousy. Like our eyes seem like they get all the attention. In the media, we have our body sees things. Seeing is believing. Visual cortex is probably the largest mechanisms in our brain. Everything's geared around the eyes. And when we're talking about things like, oh, I have such beautiful eyes. The eyes reflect the soul. All these things about the eyes in media, in poems, and music, everything about the eyes. And what if you're another part of the body? Wouldn't you get jealous of the eyes? I mean, even the top of our head, it's like you can get kissed on the forehead. We rub noses with one another. We can sit cheek to cheek. It's like we can rub elbows. Yeah. Okay. Or even interlink elbows when we're on for a walk. When we're sitting down with a loved one, with a partner, our thighs can get stroked. Our knees can bump. We can knock knees. We can even play footsies. We talk about playing foot. Feet even get more attention. But what about an ankle? Have you ever heard people talk about an ankle? Ankle gets no love. We don't have any cool idioms about an ankle. But the ankle supports the weight of the body. And as we run towards connection, as we move away from it, it supports it all. But you don't find the ankle being jealous and saying, oh, I never get the love of an eye. I wish I was an eye. It does what it does every single day because it understands it's part of the whole. It gives its service, its goal, its attention, its gift to the collective. And I think we need to think more like that. I can't do everything, but I can do some things. And I should give my gift on behalf of the greater good, the collective. It's about the collective. It's about the community. Yes, I can do a lot to build my own individual resilience, but I got to think collectively. This should be about the collective. So we have to be able to respond by thinking collectively. Do you think collectively? Is it on the forefront of your mind what's happening to others? How you can be there for others? Resilience is a powerful, powerful, powerful gift that we have. It's our ability to predict safety, but it becomes exponentially more powerful when we can help others predict safety. There's strength in numbers. We feel the power of others. We think about it. We are social beings. I'd heard, they talk about chimpanzees being close cousins to us. But if you were to be in a room full of a lot of chimpanzees, and the chimpanzee came on your shoulder and you had a banana and you gave a banana, that chimpanzee would be thinking about that banana. But if we were in a room full of people and I gave you a banana, you would not be thinking about that banana. You'd be thinking about me. Thinking about, why in the world is he giving me a banana? Because we're social beings. We think about each other. Now we just need to use that collective thinking for the good, to inspire, to keep predicting safety for one another. That's thinking collectively. So that's one. I think that's pretty practical. Can you increase your ability to think collectively? The next one is speak life. Think collectively and speak life. Words are powerful. They're absolutely powerful. They can make your body flutter in love, or they can make you tremble in fear. I mean, right now, wherever you're at, maybe you're in your home, but if you got a text message on your phone and that text message said, "I love you," just imagine what it would do for you. The warmth in your heart that would spread just to read those words in a text message. What if those words say, "Are your doors locked?" That's a different feeling, isn't it? You're like, well, why? What do you know that I don't know? Words matter. They're powerful. Is it one of my favorite songs? Has a song called Speak. And he says, look into the eyes of the brokenhearted. Watch them come alive as you speak hope, when you speak love, when you speak life. Speak life. Words matter. What you say matters. Make sure the power of those words are positive. Speak life. The term "you're beautiful." This is actually something I found on YouTube. A high school student in Chicago had a project they were doing, as a social experiment. So they went around filming everybody to the reaction of a simple line. They'd film the reaction, go up to somebody in class and teachers, and they'd say, "You're beautiful," and just film the reaction. And you can just see that people would just smile, the grin would come across their face. It says, "You're beautiful." And people go, "Why are you doing this?" "I just wanted you to know you're beautiful." And
Rick, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Has my volume dropped?
We love what you're saying.
When my heart beats off and I start thinking about these things, I apologize. Thank you for letting me know that. But this one, there was a particular that they were feeling such beautiful, and she didn't know how to handle it. She was like, "Why are you saying that? What are you mad at me, angry?" So, "No, I just want you to know you're beautiful." Clearly, this person was used to hearing power in those words.
Rick, there's a glitch with your audio.
You're breaking up.
It sounds jumbled. That's yeah.
Is that beneficial if I take these off? Is that helpful?
Yes.
Or helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me try. I apologize for that. So the power of words and saying "you're beautiful." Try that someday. Just say positive words to one another. Think about it as when you just simply speak life. Do you know the story about Thomas Edison's mother? It's such a great example of speaking life. So Thomas Edison, we know who Thomas Edison is, but or was at least. So Thomas Edison's mother gets a letter from the school, and the letter says, "I'm sorry, Miss Edison, your son is just unruly. We cannot handle his behavior. He cannot continue to go to school here. Sorry, don't have the resources to handle a kid like this." And Thomas saw his mother open the letter and it says, "Oh, mom, it's a letter from the school. What does it say?" His mom kindly folded up the letter, put it in her bureau, and she said, "Oh, the letter just said that you're special. It says that, you just need some extra attention and they don't have the ability to give it to you. And so they asked if I would educate you from home so I could give you the attention that you need, so I could show you how special you are. And that's exactly what she did. And we know what happened with that little extra love, with someone who spoke in that moment life to him. She could have told him what the letter said accurately, but she chose to speak life. And that life went on to support one of the greatest minds, the most creative mind in probably our history. And the story goes on that Thomas Edison, when his mom passed away, and he was cleaning out some of her belongings and came across that letter still in the bureau many, many years later. And he reads the letter and realizes what it says. In that moment, he realized the power of speaking life, thinking about how different his life would have been if someone in his community wouldn't have chosen to speak life. She could have just been accurate, sure, and just said exactly what the letter said, but chose to speak life. The powerful concept of speaking life to one another. Our ability to absolutely 100% choose to look across from us, to see people in our world, in our sphere of influence, and speak life. I mean, sure, there's lots of things that we can say, but the power of speaking life. Love those words. Look into the eyes of the brokenhearted. Watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, if you speak love, and if you speak life. So speak life. So we know, think collectively, speak life, and the last one is show up. Just as simple as that, show up. Do you remember Jerry Maguire? It's a movie from Jerry Maguire. Some of you have seen that. And my favorite line from Jerry Maguire, if you know the movie, you know that my favorite line, I love Black people. Okay, that was a good line, but that wasn't my favorite line. My favorite line is Jerry goes into Dorothy's house, and it's into her den, and she's having a powwow with some friends, and everybody stops and looks, and he asks for Dorothy. And Dorothy comes out, and he makes this huge speech, this oration on how much he cares, how much he was choosing to speak life in that moment. And my mind comes in. What does Dorothy say? She says, "You had me at hello." Basically, she was saying, you had me when you showed up. You chose to show up. Show up for people. Show up for people. Remember those people who showed up for you. Now, I remember the people who showed up for me. My dad showed up for me. I remember, I loved getting a chance to speak to people all over the country, but my dad was one of the first people who came to see me speak. As a matter of fact, it was my first speaking engagement. I was supposed to speak for the Kiwanis in a little town in Wyoming. And unfortunately, it was one of the greatest snowstorms in the state's history that went on. And so I couldn't even get to the hotel. I absolutely, I had to park my car and walk a couple blocks. It's snowing everywhere. And I lived in the town there, and I had to walk about a half a mile to get to the hotel. And my dad lived about 200 miles away. And I thought, oh gosh, he's not going to be able to show up. But all of a sudden I got the message that it probably didn't matter, because the sales director came up to me. She had a residence right there in the hotel. I think she was the only other person there. She said, Rick, I don't think you're going to be able to do this. That nobody can get here. So as a matter of fact, only one person showed up. And I said, well, I'll go out and tell him that we're going to cancel. And I go out there, and it was my dad. And I realized that he had to drive 200 miles and walk like I did another half mile, but he showed up, and he could sense my disappointment, and he was trying to cheer me up. He said, well, son, he said, you know what I do. I love to grill, and he always called him the grill master. And said, if I would have grilled some food, and somebody had come 200 miles through a snowstorm and had to walk an extra half mile, I'd feed them. So I got inspired by that. I said, you're right, Dad. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what you do. That's what I'm going to do. So I decided, even though he's the only person in the audience, I'm going to deliver my speech. That's what I got busy doing. I was giving my speech. I was so excited about my speech. And I just talked and talked. It was only supposed to be a 20-minute speech, but on that day, I think I talked about 45 minutes. I was just sharing every story I could think of with my dad. And when I was done, I said, "What'd you think, Dad? What'd you think?" And he said, "Son, you know I'm the grill master." I said, "Yeah, and if somebody would have driven 200 miles for some ribs, yeah, I would have fed him, but I wouldn't have fed him the whole cow." So I appreciate his wisdom even then, but he showed up for me. He showed up for me. And we have to appreciate those who show up for us. How do people show up for you? Can you show up for others? I know my youngest son, okay, all right, excuse me, my oldest son, he shows up for me too. Both of my sons do. But I remember a time at my son had some challenges, that diagnosed with autism at a young age, and created some challenges and made him a little socially awkward. So he was going to his first mainstream school, and Valentine's Day was coming up, and he wanted to give Valentine's cards out. And I said, "Nico, I don't know if people give out Valentine's cards at this school at this age." And so, "Dad, I want to do it. Will you take me to the store, buy me some Valentine's cards? I want to do it." And I said, "Sure, I'll do it." But then he sent off to school, and I got a little nervous. I thought, "Oh my gosh, they're going to make fun of him. Nobody gives out Valentine's cards at this age. What did I do? Did I just send my son into the wolves' den? What did I do?" And I was so nervous all day. And I went home early from work, and I was just sitting there fretting in the house, waiting for him to come home. I decided, well, I'm going to bake his favorite cookies. I'm going to just try to just pour love onto him when he comes in. And the bus stopped in front of the house, and he knows I always run out there to meet him off the bus. And so I met off the bus, and he didn't say a word. He just mumbled as he ran by me. He said, "Not one, not one." And he ran upstairs, and I was saying, Nico, hey, come down. I got your favorite cookies. And he's still mumbling as he comes down. I said, "Dad, I didn't forget not one name." And I was so proud of him. He showed up for me by knowing it wasn't about what they were doing for him. It was about what he was able to do. That's showing up. Who showed up for you? How do people show up? It's important that we just show up. People have showed up for you in your life, and it's meant the world to you. Community and resilience is about us showing up for others. Do you show up for others? It's simple. It's not magic. It's showing up. Show up for folks. That's all I'm asking you to do. Just show up for folks. Show up for one of your coworkers when they need someone to talk to, when they need some support, when they need some encouragement. Show up. Show up when they need you most. When friends are dealing with a broken heart and they feel like life is falling apart, when depression in coworkers is at an all-time high and they try to smile, but they can only cry, when those who you love are hurting to the core, show up, and show up some more. That's what it's about. It's easy. It's science. It's what we think, what we say, what we do. It matters. It matters. Who are you going to matter to? That's the question. Who are you going to matter to? We are based on the people we matter to and how they matter to us. I am because of my dad, my mom, my son, my dad. I know you don't know this about him, but I am because of my dad. I know he shaped me. He molded me. He wired me. I was raised by this man who was born the son of an immigrant sugar beet farmer. He changed his name to move up north because, get this, it was easier to be seen as a Black man in the late 50s, before Civil Rights Act. Okay? In the late 50s, it was easier to be seen as a Black man than to be seen as a Hispanic migrant worker in the Southwest. So he moved up north, changed his name. But he still endured discrimination in housing, employment, and healthcare. But he's still standing. He's still showing up, and he still matters. I am because he is. And my mother, kidnapped out as a child outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, gone from her family for days, probably endured unspeakable acts of harm from the child. She was abused by her father. She ran away at the age of 16. She lost her firstborn son to pneumonia. Lost 9 siblings to cancer. She's still standing. She matters to me. I am because she is. And my son, And I told you, 3 years of age with a terrible diagnosis. Before play dates, he had more dates with occupational therapists, ideologists, all the therapists, and they all said, he'll never be able to go to mainstream. He will always need special education. But I can tell you right now, he is a sophomore in high school, a mainstream public high school here in Phoenix. He's taking geometry. I mean, he's getting a D, but he's taking geometry. And they said that he couldn't do it. He's done it because he matters. He's wired me. I am a product of the strength that young man has showed on a daily basis. We are who surrounds us. Who do you matter to? What will you do? And I know that I've got to come to an end here. I got to leave a couple seconds for questions, but please don't let this be just a great message that you heard. Go out and do something. Go out and matter to somebody. Practice thinking collectively. Practice speaking life. Practice showing up for people. And then we'll see the power that is generated from this phenomenon that we call community resilience. So thank you for your time and attention. I do want to leave a little time for questions. I certainly appreciate you all, but make it active. Go out and make it happen. Any questions? I want to know from Yulika, Jeannie, anybody who was monitoring any of the chat. I didn't get a chance to see any, but want to make sure I left a little bit of time to answer a few questions.
There's lots of love coming in here. Absolutely inspiring. Thank you. Excellent presentation. Powerful. Thank you. Thank you. Hearts and love.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
and thanks for putting.
Thank you for. I'm confident you guys will go out there and matter to somebody. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, wonderful comments, Rick. Anybody have any questions for Rick? I guess I'm interested in what you've done in some of your programs to actually practice all of these wonderful things, to actually show up and,
Yeah. Well, I hope this is a part of who we are and not just what we say. If you've had the time to take any of our courses, and I suggest you do, find us on our website, enroll in some of our courses, you will find that even how we teach, hopefully it is demonstrating that we want to think collectively, we want to speak life, and we want to show up for folks. And I know that our founder will be presenting for you in a couple of weeks, I think, and she will also share her message. She's the one that was able to help me get started. She thought collectively. She certainly speaks life, and she shows up for me continually. So can't wait for you to get a chance to hear from her. But I can definitely say, even in the products that we sell, you will see a sense of who we are and the desire that we have to build community, to absolutely share this message of resilience, to make sure that people are predicting safety in all very, very practical ways. So the website is, I can type that into the
chat.
Type it into the chat here. Should be able to. Yes, I can. Okay. It is criresilient.org. Okay. criresilient.org. You can find some message about our training. We've got, if you like the message I talked about the predicting brain, we've got a whole training coming up on the predicting brain. We do training of trainers. We want to empower this work. We want the whole country to understand the power of this work. So, and this is a good start that we have with you folks, and we know that you're going to go out there and share with others.
And we'd love everybody to actually fill out our evaluation. I think Karen's put that in the chat. So please do that. But if there are any other programs that people are working on that really actually build community resilience, we'd love to hear from you as well. It's really getting back to the basics of taking care of others around us.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you also, and what a beautiful way of a human-centered approach to talking about building community resilience, why it's important, and how we all matter in that process. And I just hope you all save the chat, because there's so much love in there. And that if you ever need something poured into you, I think this is perfect to just go and read that or reread that. So.
And actually, it's a
you.
wonderful example of how we can actually pour love into other people, isn't it? It's a wonderful example. So thank you so much. We appreciate everybody's participation today. We hope you join us February 3rd. We're looking forward to another wonderful presentation. And we know Teresa will be with us, I think, in April. She works with Rick, so we have another chance to really hear what you're doing, Rick, and how you're impacting the lives of people. So thanks so much for being with us in your wonderful presentation today. Everyone have a wonderful evening, and we'll look forward to.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
In the, for the survey, for the certificate, there's like 2 links that were sent. I'm not sure which one, or is it the same survey? Is the same thing for the certificate?
Yeah, if you fill out the survey, you should be able to get your certificate.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking the question. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for being with us, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone again in February. Spread the good word, bring more people together, think about community and bringing others with you to our training so that we can all learn together. I think it's powerful that if we can have other people join us in our counties and in our groups, in our communities, we're going to be learning to actually put all of this into action together. So thank you so much.
I just
Have a
have
wonderful
one-
day.